Rants. Like and subscribe. Today we're doing another request, and this was anticipated. This is a classic episode of Fresh Prince, Season 4, Episode 8. Blood is thicker than mud. Yep. And you guys wanted this video for a long time, and I apologize for the delay. See, Rants got tired of depending on different, streaming sites and whatnot. And I just went old school. Hopped on that good eBay. Don't mean to plug and whatnot, but I hopped on the eBay. And I had to go out and buy these series on DVD and whatnot, right? But we're good. We're good now. We have every episode of a lot of these series, so we're good to go. So that's good news for you guys, right? And before we even start this episode rant, because this is a classic episode now, I think everybody knows that. But Rants went to school? Yeah. You guys don't know that, but Rants went to school. Rants pledged. Yeah. Now, where I went to school and what I pledged is irrelevant to this channel, of course, right? But I could relate. And speaking of relate, it's so funny because, of course, I'm Randumb Rants. And my cousin, Big Ron. Yeah, Big Ron. R-O-N-E. Ron. Yeah, he was actually going to the University of Los Angeles during this time. And he was a Gamma. Yep. So, firsthand, and he was actually in the background of one of these scenes. Yep. And I'll definitely point him out when we get there, of course, now, right? But nonetheless, though, I do know, some stuff. I don't know if I'm going to be able to share it on YouTube, right? Because you want to protect these organizations, right? These black organizations, they are non-hazing organizations, okay? So let's just nip that in the bud right now, okay? Phi Beta Gamma, along with any other black fraternal organization, are non-hazing organizations. Okay? But I say all that to say, I know little stories about the line that the camera couldn't get, because it's a show, and well, I guess we'll start from the beginning of the episode, right? Because that's the only proper way to do, right? And we see it's the fall semester of 1993 at the University of Los Angeles. And it's safe to say it's the fall semester, right? Because we're in Season 4, Episode 8. We're so early in the season. So it's clearly fall semester, right? And you guys see it's Fraternity Rush Week. Now, we can break that down real quick, okay? I believe, now, if I'm not mistaken, you guys can correct me, in the comments and whatnot if you guys know. I believe the rushes originally started. Let me give you guys an example. If Pi Beta Kappa, there it's going to be now this is all underground. This is before the internet, of course, right? Way before the internet, right? And if you want to be one of these people, you're going to know this, right? And let's just say it'll be like Phi Beta Kappa. They're going to have a rush in the third stall bathroom in the cafeteria in the men's, like by the ice cream spat or whatever, right? Like it has to be like something, I know, right? But it has to be something particular, right? And the average person is just going to be in the caf eating, but then you're going to see a line of men lining up by this bathroom. You're like, what's going on? Like, did somebody have food poisoning or something? Then you'll see one of these members walk up, with maybe like a paper, maybe some, cards or something of that nature, and they'll post it and you'll see these men rush in, and grab a paper or whatnot. And that's like the first part, right? Now, nonetheless, I don't know, maybe it was fights or something, but it got changed. And then we want to say that was like during like the days of like pledging in the open. Like when you guys see shows like A Different World, when they were pledging in the open, those were probably those days. But as the 90s, underground pledging became, a thing and whatnot due to events and whatnot, right? And now I believe they do interest meetings. And I can't speak for every school. Now, I'm only speaking for certain schools and whatnot, right? But in the 90s, of course, and we're just going off this show, because, I was a kid and whatnot, but they were having fraternity rush weeks and whatnot, right? And we're going to use this show as an example. Let's get back on topic, right? They're having a rush week, and it's clearly like, well, it was a certain time in a semester, right? And the school will allow every organization basically to meet up at a certain place and throw certain events where they can meet potential members for their organization. It's basically the first part of pledging again, right? And you see Will, let's get back to the show. You see Will helping Big Head Jackie out. Yeah, Jackie is another one of Will's baddies. He crashes her throughout the series. Will stays with the baddie. Now, he's Will Smith. Everyone knows this. This is season 4, right? And Will's helping out Jackie, and he's like, I hope these Greek clowns clean up after themselves. And Jackie asks, like, what, you not pledging anything? And Will, being a typical hood guy that's fortunate to make it to college, of course, he's like, no. Frats are for lame people that wasn't already cool to begin with. And we can go down that road, but that's neither here nor there. Let's just stay on topic, right? And you see Carl walk into the scene, right, with a clean canary yellow Izod Lacoste shirt on, right? Fresh, right? And Jackie tells Carlton, Will doesn't see any benefit in pleasure. And Carlton's like, well, he's crazy. The more activities I'm involved in, the better, it'll look for Princeton and whatnot. And then we see the first organization, and you see a familiar guy, right? Yeah, that guy actually went to Bayside High. He was one of Screech buddies. And you see he pledged. He ended up going to the University of Los Angeles. Most likely on a full ride because he was smart, right? And you see he pledged. Yeah, he pledged Delta Kappa Tau. And Delta Kappa Tau, they're clearly the nerds on campus, right? They eventually, become, they eventually go on in the tech world, right? But nonetheless, though, that doesn't really fit Carlton. Now, I know what you think, and the show writes him as a nerd. Carlton has spunk to him. See, don't ever forget, Carlton's mother is from Philadelphia. And if you did forget, the end of this show is definitely going to remind you, right? But nonetheless, though, right? Then we see Lambda Kappa Nu. And you see them, they sing their song, we're Lambda Kappa Nu, our blood is very blue, our money's owed, our cars are gold, now who the heck are you? And I'm going to let you guys know, to be honest, this was probably the best option for Carlton. And I know you guys probably agree with me on this, right? If Carlton could have been a Lambda, I think it would have really benefited him. It definitely in Princeton. It would have benefited him. And he wouldn't have been wasting his time with the organization that he ended up choosing, And Carlton goes over to the Lambdas. He's entertaining them, right? And let me explain something right now so I won't have to later, okay? Carlton Banks. He is an org-changing pledgee, okay? If you never pledged, all right, let me just break down, right? This guy has the potential if he wants to run your organization one day on a national level. Understand that. He more than likely has better grades than you, right? And what grades? It's college, right? But guess what Carlton Banks has, though? He has connections. Yeah, that's what he has. Connections. You want Carlton Banks in your organization. Okay? And y'all know where I'm getting at because y'all know where the show go, right? And I'm going to get in my feelings when we get there. And then we going to really talk about this at the end. But let me stay on topic. Okay? Because we didn't already explain that now, right? And then we see them, right? You guys are introduced to them, right? Phi, Beta, Gamma. Clearly a play on Omega Psi with the bald heads and the loud seeking of attention. But needless to say, they do their step routine, right? And Will is impressed. But Carlton's still showing his interest in the Lambdas. And you see Carlton, they're making their comparisons with their gold cards. This is a perfect fit for him. Perfect fit for him. And Will quickly messes up his life. You know, with one split decision, your life can change, right? Will pulls him to the side and he's like, you know, because he has big influence on Carlton. He's like, don't you want to pledge something with a group of guys that look like you? And Carlton's like, well, they all are wearing Lacoste shirts. They do look like me. And, you know, Carlton goes back over there, you know, where he should be, right? And then we're introduced to Top Dog. Yeah, you see him. He daps up Will. He's like, my Philly boy, Will, what's up? Haven't saw you on the court lately. And Will letting him know, look, I retired, but you know, when I was out there, I was giving y'all 55, 60 points. Like, let's be realistic, you know? But to be honest, he was like, you know, the quality of the courts, they're crazy, Top Dog. Top Dog was like, well, you haven't been out there in a minute. Me and my frat brothers, we raised some money and we fixed that court up. And Will's like, Top Dog, you're in a frat? He's like, duh, my name is Top Dog, and I run the frat. Hence the name Top Dog. And you know, that would be a hint right there to be like, maybe we shouldn't pick this brother because he's not the brightest, right? But Will is so cool, and you know, people are blinded by the coolness, right? So nonetheless, right? Top Dog's like, yeah. You should check this out, Will. And Will, of course, declines because he's from the hood, of course, right? But then he sees a fine early 90s Freaknik Fox approach Top Dog. And, you know, that's all you need for a Puma Hound like Will to get down. And that's most hood dudes in college because you got to understand, right? When you get to the college and you let them know, I'm from blah, blah, blah. I'm from blah, blah, blah. I'm from blah, blah, blah. See, that only works the first week. Because after that week, everybody knows you now. And hopefully you didn't get that nickname. Oh, they go North Philly Nate. You know, like, hopefully you ain't getting no nickname like that. They go Baltimore Brian, you know, because that's all he talks about. That's all they talk about. Like, people eventually get past that, you know? And when you're trying to influence these hood guys, I guess, into a fraternity, if they not already exposed to it, if their parents didn't do it, the females will get them every time, and it got Will, right? And Top Dog tells Will, he's like, nah, man, we do a lot of community work. We go to the hospitals. We tutor kids at the juvenile detention facility. And Carlton overhears this. He's like, oh, well, Princeton loves community service hours on the transcript, but I wouldn't have to go to that detention facility, would I? Because, you know, those kids are troublemakers. And Top Dog turns around and laughs. And he was like, we need a little humor at the frat house. And he passes both of them interest brochures and whatnot and tells them to check it out, right? And I know, right? Because we got this in the comments, right? But let's just nip this in the bud before we continue on. Let's just nip this in the bud right now. Yes, Top Dog does look similar to OG Bobby Johnson from South Central. You know, Deuce Gang, right? You guys know, right? But that is not OG Bobby Johnson. See, you thought you had me, right? I know in the comments you guys be trying to get me. No, you didn't get me, okay? How could that be OG Bobby Johnson? And OG Bobby Johnson got a whole son to raise with a terrible hairline. And that kid's hairline was ridiculous, okay? So you mean to tell me he has time to pledge college students and deal with his son's hairline? Like, this is before people, like, were flying to Turkey. This is 1993. People not just flying to Turkey to get their hairline fixed. Okay, so make that make sense. Okay, you didn't get rants. All right, so we nipped that in the bud. Okay, I got y'all now. Okay, so y'all didn't get me. I got y'all. Rants will always win. All right. And in the next scene, we see Will and Carlton walk up, and they already hip due to, Aunt Viv telling them Uncle Phil is going through a midlife crisis, right? So they see his motorcycle, and he's defensive, right? He tells everyone, "This is my bike. I bought it with my money, and I don't want to hear anything else about it." Because his wife just pressed him out before they walked up, right? So, of course, Phil, being one of the top TV dads of all time, he asks the kids, "Well, how's things at school?" Carlton says, "Great, I'm actually thinking about pledging Phi Beta Gamma." And Phil says, "Oh, okay, Judge Morton is a Gamma." And Will says, he's also alcoholic. And Phil says, no, that's Judge Martin, right? But see, Judge Martin handles heavy cases, though. Heavy cases. Y'all already know, like, yeah, homies and stuff like that, 187, stuff like that. So that's why he drinks a lot. But that's off subject. Right? That's off subject. So anyway, so Uncle Phil says, "That's great, son. You're a real college man now, huh?" And, Phil assumes Will isn't pledging, right? He's like, Will's like, "Nah, I got a reputation." Phil's like, "Don't sell your life short, man. You never know what you may get out of it. You should do it. You should try it out." Will was like, "Well, I heard they do a lot of community work and stuff like that." Phil's like, "Yeah, the Gamers are a good group. You should give it a shot." And he convinces Will to pledge. And you gotta remember, Phil's going through his midlife crisis, so he tells Will to hop on the motorcycle so he can give him a ride. And Will does it because he doesn't have too much of a choice. And in the next scene, now we see the pledging process, right? And the show is made to believe that the pledging process has started. No. You guys are sadly mistaken. These guys were online weeks prior to this, right? They're only showing you highlights of Hell Week, I would say, right? Because the camera guys, they can't show the whole process, right? But like I said, we have to protect these black organizations. Phi Beta Gamma is a non-hazing organization, So understand, this is actually the beginning of Hell Week that they're showing us, okay? And you see Top Dog has them line up. And of course we know it's a show, but if you have PTSD from this nonsense, you would already know that they should be lined up according to height. But like we said, it's a show, so Will has to be next to Carlton, right? And Top Dog tells him, "Yeah, I hope you like your new uniforms, because you're going to be wearing them all week." And you see the guy with the hat on, right? And anybody that's done this before, of course, it's going to stand out to you because, everybody should be wearing a hat if he has one on, right? But nonetheless, though, I do know the story behind this, right? And this is all alleged. So allegedly, because, Phi Beta Gamma is a non-hazing organization, But the guy has a hat on because one of the older brothers gave him some shampoo, and he was told to wash his hair in a public Jack-in-the-Box bathroom toilet. And he caught a crazy ringworm. Now, like I said, this is all alleged. So this is, but also, like I said, my cousin Big Ron was there. R-O-N-E, Ron. So Rant's not lying. But anyway, though, you see Carlton, right? And you got to understand, they've been pledged by the other brother, potential brother, Sticky Fingers. And it's Hell Week, so it's really time, it's no game. Like, now they got big brother Top Dog there, right? And Top Dog tells him, y'all gonna be wearing these Ghostbuster outfits for a week. And Carlton's like, "Well, that's not proper hygiene." And Top Dog warns him, "Look, Pledge Banks, only speak when you're spoken to. You should already know that by now. And I see you like to wash clothes." And Carlton says, "Well, actually my butler washes them. I'm not even going to lie to you." Top Dog was like, What you mean, your butler?" Carlton was like, "Yeah. He's a whiz with the drying sheets. My clothes, come out butter soft, especially the polos. You should feel them." And Top Dog's like, "Where are you from, Pledge Banks?" like I said, he is not there every night. He's familiar with them, but this is really his first night on set, to be honest with you guys. He's usually handling everything. They're being pledged by the other brothers and whatnot, right? And Carlton's like, Bel-Air. And Will tries to save him. He says, South Central of Bel-Air. Because that's a play on him looking like OG Bobby Johnson, as we mentioned before, right? That's a joke on campus, too. And Carlton's like, yeah, I live right across the street from Aaron Spelling's mansion. The producer of Beverly Hills 90210. And Top Dog's like, I never watched that. And Carlton's like, what? You don't know what you're missing. Dylan's on the verge of getting back with Brenda. And now Top is thrown off because potential brother Sticky Fingers didn't warn him about Carlton. Like I mentioned before, he's handling the events. He's the main guy in charge, So Will, pulls Carlton to the side. He's like, you got to chill out. You don't want to draw attention to yourself. We all just got to be one, you don't want to do too much. And then we see my cousin, Big Ron. He finally makes his cameo in the show, right? You see him. He's going to be in the background, right? But yeah, he brings the mop bucket out. And we see Top Dog tell everyone, well, it looks like our floor needs a little scrub. And Carlton, says under his breath, hell, wax and a polish too. And Top Dog overhears that. He's like, hey, that's a great idea. So get busy, everybody, and thank Banks for doubling the workload. And you see Top Dog, he goes to potential brother Sticky Fingers, and he asks him, what's up with Banks? And Sticky tells him, relax, you don't know him. See, because Sticky's been pledging him. And I mean, Sticky's basically like the Dean of the line, basically. And Top Dog says, well, I'm going to teach him the true meaning of Hell Week, right? And in the next scene, we see, the pledges, they still at the frat house. And Top Dog walks in and he announced he's splitting the line up, And, they're going to do different tasks around the house. And he says, Philly and Moneybags, you guys can team up. And now we can actually see the hazing that they were allowed to show in the show, right? And Will is painting the door with a traditional paint roller, right? While Carlton is using a tiny, detailed paintbrush to paint the same door. You see Will, he's grooming a tiny little dog, while Carlton on the other side is washing Beethoven. The damn dog looks like Cujo, and Carlton is, you see him, he's breaking giant blocks of ice for the brothers, just so they can have cold beverages, and you see Big Ron and his line brother, they getting fresh squeezed lemonade from Carlton, but Will is only serving it. Carlton is actually hand squeezing all of these lemons, right? And the lemonade has to be sour. It's basically lemon juice, right? But Big Ron is probably pouring gin in that because I actually know him personally. That's my cousin and whatnot. But that's neither here nor there. It's neither here nor there. Now, you see Will, he's doing like they're doing this swallowing of the goldfish, right? But then you see they give Carlton like a big sea bass. And it's like, come on now. Like, you got to be serious, right? And in the next scene, right, we see the pledges finally get a break, right? And Will pulls Carlton to the side and he's like, hey, this? They're working you harder than everybody else. And Carlton's like, well, no, not necessarily. Everybody had to retard a parking lot. And Will's like, yeah, but we got to wear boots. And then you see Carlton did it with his socks on. It's like, come on now. And Carlton's like, yeah, but, it's going to be worth it when I hear them call me a brother. And then we see potential brother Sticky Fingers pull Top Dog to the side and he's like, I don't like what you're doing to pledge Banks. Like, you got to stop that. Just stop it. And Top Dog is like, he's going on this little power strike, right? He's like, I didn't ask you, And now Hell Week came to an end. We see they're having a party, right? And Carlton, he asks, he's like, well, don't you think it's, funny that they're having a party before they tell us if we crossed? And Will's already brainwashed. He's like, yeah, well, we'll get to do this to somebody else next year, so it'll be all good, And Carlton asks, he's like, you think we made it, though? And Will's like, well, whether we made it or not, you hung in there the whole time, and you didn't drop, so I'm proud of you. And Carlton wants a hug now, and Will actually gives him one, but they go off. And Will's now admiring this lady at a party and whatnot. And he tries to spit game. He goes back over to Top Dog. He's like, yeah, you see that girl over there? She was fine. And Top Dog, like, that's just the tip of the iceberg, man. You ain't seen nothing. And in the background you see my cousin Big Ron. He about to pounce on something too. You already know. Shout outs to my cousin Big Ron. I know you watching this. Rone, Big Ron, right? And Carlton, he runs into Top Dog and he innocently asks him, he's like, you think the DJ has any Neil Diamond or maybe some Rod Stewart? And Top Dog sarcastically says, I don't know. Last time we played them, the party got out of hand. And Carlton's like, yeah, you should see them in concert, and walks off. And, Top Dog, he hollers at Will. He's like, look, I'm not supposed to say anything, but you have nothing to worry about. You're in. And Will's like, word, that's a bet. So me and Carlton got in? And Top Dog's like, well, not exactly. Carlton just isn't our type. And then we see Carlton not being scared to be himself in a room full of strangers, which is a rare trait these days. When he's doing the traditional Carlton dance. And Will's like, what you mean not our type? What you mean by that? And Top Dog's like, Will, Carlton's he's not like you and me. You know what I'm saying? And Will's like, no, I don't know what you're saying. And Top Dog's like, Will, Carlton isn't the type of person I want in Phi Beta Gamma. And Will's like, well, what type of person is that? Like, what type of person you want? And Top Dog's like, well, there's enough polo shirts and wingtip shoes in corporate America. We don't need a brother like that in this fraternity. And Will's like, he's exactly what you need in this fraternity. Carlton got straight A's since preschool. He gives you 150% every time. And Top Dog, he's off his power trip again. He tells Will, look, I realize he's your cousin and you got to defend him, but this discussion is closed. And Will walks off and he tells Carlton, who's getting down. He's getting down with his bad self. He's like, Carlton, let's leave, man. I didn't make it. Come on, let's just leave. And Carlton's like, huh? You didn't make it? So Carlton walks up to Top Dog. He's like, why didn't Will cross over? I don't understand that. And Top Dog tells Carlton, oh, Will made it. It was you that we don't want, buddy. And Carlton's like, huh? How come you don't want me? I did everything you asked. I cooked. I cleaned. I even hand washed the toilets. And Top Dog says, yeah, everything your butler does for you. I'm not accepting no prep school Bel-Air bred sellout into my fraternity. You would think Top Dog's the damn founder, right? But nonetheless, though, Will stepped to him like he was about to fight him. Then you see potential brothers sticky fingers in the background, right? You see it. But nonetheless, Carlton's like, nah, wait, Will, I got this. You can relax, right? He was like, you think I'm a sellout? Why? Because I live in a big house? Or dress a certain way? Why? Because I prefer Barry Manilow? Being black isn't what I'm trying to be. It's what I am. And I'm running the same race and jumping the same hurdles. So why are you tripping me up? When I met you, you said we need to stick together, Top Dog. But you don't even know what that means. If you ask me, you the real sellout. And then he walked off. And Will, he still wants some attention, right? He tells Top Dog, yeah, like my cousin would say, I'm going to make like a tree and leaf, right? And Sticky Fingers, he walks up to Top Dog. He was like, yeah, you don't speak for the rest of us. I'm going to have you kicked out of here. And then you see outside of the party, right? Carlton's like, Will, you said make like a tree and leaf. I would never say nothing corny like that. It's make like a banana and split, right? And then in the final scene of this show, right? We see Will and Carlton. They're telling Phil, right? They come back and they got the sad faces. And Aunt Viv's like, oh, I guess we're looking at the new men of Phi Beta Gamma, right? And Carlton's like, nah, not necessarily. Apparently I wasn't black enough to be a brother. And Will's like, yeah, the pledge leader said he didn't want sellouts in the organization and whatnot. And Phil is like, what? Like, this really irritates me. You know, I worked very hard to give my family a good life. And you got this Bumpy Johnson looking brother telling me there's a penalty for my success? Ain't gonna penalize my family? Man, when are we gonna stop doing this to each other? And then the show ends, right? And now let's talk about Top Dog. And I mean, you know, my true rant is, this is the part you guys been waiting for, right? Now, this is not a sports page, okay? But this is a clear example of how and why college coaches get fired. See, bad recruiting and that know-it-all head guy in charge ego, right? Like, you're so pressed to get Will in your fraternity, Top Dog. But Will originally told you he wasn't even interested, you know? And it was proven that until he saw the Freaknik honey kiss you on the cheek, you know, he didn't even want it. He didn't even want in. So he's only joining it for females, right? And that's cool, you know? You get guys like that all the time in your organization, right? But those are the type of guys that you're not going to see 10 years after undergrad. Because, see, the organization serves them no more purpose anymore, right? It only served them from the 2 years after they went over, like 19 to 22, 21, you know, to their senior year, right? Once they move on and get married and whatnot, what do they need it for, right? You know, you see it all the time. And then Carlton, on the other hand, let's really talk about Carlton, right? He was a threat to Top Dog. Clearly, right? Like, you're the head of the organization, right? And with that beard, buddy, it's clear to say you're a senior, right? And that's why you shouldn't really take Sticky Fingers' little threat at the end of the episode serious. Because main man's going to have to report that to the Nationals. And why would you do that? Because that's going to make your chapter look bad, right? But getting back on Carlton, though, right? He clearly probably has better grades than Top Dog, right? And the thing is, see, Carlton overachieved when he was pledging. And Top Dog is a very, very wild guy. He's actually the wildest type of person to pledge a person, because he would make somebody do something that he didn't even do himself to get on. And that right there is psychotic behavior. You know, anybody that's in the comments, that's, well, y'all clearly not going to speak on it, right? But yeah, Rants know what he talking about. Y'all know Rants know what he talking about, right? And then we all have brains, right? So to know that Carlton has a butler would mean that Carlton has money. So maybe you should do some research on the bank's name, being that you attend the University of Los Angeles, right? But we get it, there's no Google at the time. And that's why you have Carlton right in front of you. See, if you cared about your organization, Top Dog, you would have asked Carlton, hey, what does your parents do? And you would have found out that his father's a judge. Yeah, you would have found that out, right? And see, when you're in college, you know, you're clearly striving to be where Carlton comes from. That if not, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons. And why not add someone to your org and possibly befriend someone with a butler? Someone that has money. Idiot. He lives in Bel-Air. You can hang out in Bel-Air. Remember he said, hey, my org raised some money to get the basketball courts fixed? Well, guess what? This kid comes from money. Okay? This provides your organization better resources. And then you can say you pledged Carlton. I mean, okay, this is a random example, right? But just think about it. Just think about it, right? Martin Luther King Jr., for example, right? He went to Morehouse. He pledged Alpha Phi Alpha, correct? Now, he passes away early, but think about it, though. Amongst the Alphas, what about the people that pledged Martin Luther King Jr.? I know that was a big bragging point. Like, oh, yeah, remember the guy that did the I Have a Dream speech? Yep. Should have saw him when he was eating an apple. You know? Like, seriously. Like, they got those stories. That makes them legends, right? You pledging Carlton. Carlton's going to be a future leader of your organization on a national level. You pledged him. That would make you the man, too. And Philip Banks. Well, all right, okay. Philip Banks, I tell y'all what. Because this video is a little too long. And I made it a little too long. But I tell you guys what, though, right? We're going to continue this conversation on an upcoming video. The relationship between Carl Winslow and Philip Banks. So you guys stay tuned. Like and subscribe. Randumb Rants.